Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Before that fateful day when Hagrid led Harry Potter into Diagon Alley, magic had remained something abstract for the boy. It was nothing more than a few strange letters, the confusing words of a half-giant, and the shocking revelation that he was a wizard. But everything changed the moment Hagrid tapped 3 times on the brick wall behind the leaky cauldron. Magic took shape. A noisy, mysterious world full of wonder opened up before Harry, a world where his parents had once lived and to which he now belonged. Diagon Alley became not just a first step into the wizarding world, but a symbol of how magic could be part of everyday life, real, tangible, and, at times, deeply strange. The more you examine the details, the more questions arise, and today, we're diving into the strangest, most awkward, and logically tangled aspects of this magical place. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Is Diagon Alley a street or an entire town? At first glance, Diagon Alley seems like a single street filled with shops, but as the story unfolds, we discover offshoots like Nocturne Alley, a haven for dark artifacts and shady dealers. This suggests that Diagon Alley may be just one part of a larger hidden commercial district shielded from muggles. If that's the case, where are its boundaries? Are there alleys with butcher shops, bakeries, laundromats, or magical repair workshops? Have we only seen a fraction of what exists? And if so, what makes Diagon Alley different from a full-fledged magical town? Number 2. Who actually owns Diagon Alley? J.K. Rowling intentionally skipped over adult topics like rent, taxes, and local governance. But fans are still left wondering, who owns Diagon Alley? Is it the private property of an old wizarding family? Is it controlled by the Ministry of Magic? If shop spaces are rented, what are the terms? The Weasley twins, for example, opened their store with just 1,000 galleons and managed to stock it with goods. Was it a rental, a purchase, or some special deal made with someone powerful? Number 3. Where are the ordinary groceries? Magic is handy, but as the books clearly state, food cannot be conjured out of thin air. So the question naturally arises, where do wizards buy bread, meat, milk, and other everyday essentials? Diagon Alley is full of shops selling sweets, potion ingredients, magical creatures, and of course wands. But where's the butcher? Where's the vegetable market? Are these things tucked away inside alleys we never saw? Or do wizards simply shop from muggles and not make a fuss about it? Number 4. Where exactly does Floo powder take you? In Chamber of Secrets, Harry accidentally ends up in Nocturne Alley after mispronouncing his destination while using Floo powder. Meanwhile, the entire Weasley family safely arrives in Diagon Alley. But where exactly did they arrive? They just said Diagon Alley, but there are dozens of shops. Does that mean there's a central communal fireplace in the middle of the street? Or are there multiple fireplaces with magic directing the traveller to the safest one? Either way, the system seems vague and unreliable, especially considering how one mispronounced syllable can land you in a den of dark magic. Number 5. Why the double barrier? Muggles can't see the leaky cauldron thanks to concealment spells. They pass right by it without realizing it's there. So why is there a second barrier, a brick wall that opens only through a magical tapping sequence? Who is this wall protecting? And if muggles can't see the place anyway, is it meant to block house elves, eavesdropping cats, or ministry spies? Or is it simply a traditional magical formality that no longer serves a practical purpose? Number 6. How did Diagon Alley survive Voldemort's regime? During the Second Wizarding War, Diagon Alley became a dark, desolate place. Many shops closed, the streets emptied. Yet some stores, like Ollivander's, continued to exist, albeit in a ruined state. Which raises the question, under what conditions were they allowed to operate? Some shops may have fallen under Death Eater control, others may have paid for protection. After Voldemort's fall, there must have been issues of restitution. Were properties returned to their rightful owners? Who funded the rebuilding? Who reignited the commerce? Number 7. Is Diagon Alley just a shopping district or a place where people live? Hogsmeade is considered the only entirely magical village in Britain, but Diagon Alley clearly has no muggles, and many shops don't seem to close for the night. So, who cleans the streets? Where do the shop owners sleep? Do they live above their stores or commute from some magical suburb? If wizards do live in the alley, why isn't it officially considered a magical settlement like Hogsmeade? And if they don't, why rent space in a place where no one stays overnight? Number 8. Where do visiting wizards stay? When Harry stays at the Leaky Cauldron in Prisoner of Azkaban, he gets a small room, a fireplace, and some peace. But Tom the innkeeper never mentions other guests. No footsteps in the hall, no sounds of breakfast chatter, no signs of life beyond Harry, Tom, and the odd witch or two passing through. Can this tiny pub really be the only place for visiting witches and wizards to stay? Diagon Alley is a magical hub. Witches from Wales, potion buyers from Dublin, wand seekers from the Highlands. They all come here, especially in late August, when school shopping begins. Are they expected to pop in and out in a single day? Floo in, shop fast, Floo out. What about families with small children, travelling broomstick salesmen, visiting curse breakers from Egypt like Bill Weasley? Where do they sleep? We never hear of magical inns or hotels, no mention of a witch's rest or the enchanted hearth. Not even in the background. Maybe they're hidden, protected by charms like the Quidditch World Cup tents. But if so, why are they never mentioned? Rowling gave us rooms inside tents, beds inside cupboards, and wizarding hospitals, but left out something as basic as overnight lodging. The magical world can stretch time and space, but apparently not into a guest room. Number 9. Why is there so little protection from criminals and scammers? Diagon Alley feels safe until you look closer. Just one wrong word with Floo powder and Harry ends up in Knockturn Alley, face to face with criminals. No guard stops him. No one asks questions. In Chamber of Secrets, he stumbles into Borgin and Burke's alone. Lucius Malfoy is there too, trying to sell dark artifacts. No aura shows up. No official presence. Just shadows and secrets. Why isn't Diagon Alley protected? We never see patrolling auras. No magical alarms, no ministry checkpoints. Are visitors supposed to rely on Fred and George to keep peace with joke wands? Even during Voldemort's rise, when danger is everywhere, the alley is left to defend itself. In Half-Blood Prince, Katie Bell is cursed after shopping in Hogsmeade, not far from Diagon Alley. If that can happen there, what's stopping it here? Maybe the shops have silent wards, maybe Gringotts is too intimidating for criminals. But we're never told, there's no proof, no security is ever mentioned by name. In a world where someone can vanish with a disapparition crack, leaving behind only smoke and screams, shouldn't Diagon Alley have something more than wishful thinking to protect its people? Number 10. Why is everything so cramped and inconvenient? Diagon Alley is suffocating. Narrow lanes, crooked doorways, crowds pressing shoulder to shoulder. During Harry's first visit in Philosopher's Stone, the street is already packed. By the time he returns in Half-Blood Prince, it's even worse. The shops are darkened, the people anxious, but still, no space to breathe. And during back-to-school season, total chaos, owls screech, students spill into the street, parents shout, there's barely room to walk, let alone shop. Why hasn't anyone expanded it? Wizards can stretch tents into mansions and fit dragons inside briefcases. Why not widen the alley, extend the shops, magically create a second level? Even the Weasleys use extendable ears to stretch their magic, yet no one stretches Diagon Alley. It's as if the street must stay cramped, as if the clutter, the noise, the pressure, that's part of the magic, part of the tradition, but for who? Maybe wizards don't want change, maybe they believe charm lies in discomfort. Or maybe, deep down, they enjoy the chaos. Fred and George certainly do. In Order of the Phoenix, their shop blasts music and fireworks into the street. Bit crowded in it? George grins, and no one complains. Because in Diagon Alley, the mess is part of the identity. It's magical, yes, but also messy, loud, and strangely proud of it. Number 11. What's hidden in the shop basements? The shops in Diagon Alley are tiny on the outside, but their inventory is endless. Ollivanders has thousands of wands. Flourish and Blot stocks every textbook for all 7 years at Hogwarts. Even the apothecary shelves rare dragon parts and shimmering powders. But where do they keep it all? The front rooms are packed with people. The counters are narrow, there's no space, and yet the stock never runs out. Something must be hidden beneath. Hidden doors, enchanted trapdoors, secret staircases. In The Half-Blood Prince, Fred and George show Harry a new product from their lab upstairs. But what about what's below? What's in the cellar of Borgin and Burke's? When Harry ends up there by mistake in the Chamber of Secrets, he sees shrunken heads and cursed objects. But that's just the storefront. What lies behind the locked doors? Vaults? Forbidden items? Maybe things too dark even for display? It's easy to imagine shady deals happening below the surface. Quiet whispers, private buyers, dark objects kept off the record. What if Nocturne Alley isn't the only place for questionable goods? Maybe some shops in Diagon Alley keep a foot in both worlds. Light above, shadow below. And yet the Ministry never inspects, no laws are mentioned, no search charms cast. The basements stay hidden, out of sight, out of mind. Number 12. Why aren't wizards afraid of fires? Diagon Alley is filled with flammable chaos, powdered bicorn horn, exploding snap, Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs, cauldrons boiling with who knows what. Yet no one talks about fire safety. Not once do we see a fire brigade, not a single enchanted sprinkler, no magical in case of fire break glass spell. It's as if the idea of something catching fire is unthinkable in the wizarding world. But that can't be true. Fred and George's shop alone is a walking fire hazard. In Half-Blood Prince, the windows are stacked with fireworks and explosive candy. A customer accidentally sets off a decoy detonator, and it's just funny. No alarms, no panic, no incendio-proof measures. Why doesn't anyone worry? Do they all assume that a quick aguamenti will fix everything? But what if a wand is broken? What if a shopkeeper is unconscious? Magic isn't always instant or precise. Even Dumbledore had to concentrate when putting out Hagrid's burning hut. In a world where a single spell can create fire, incendio, fiendfire, cursed candles, how can there be no system to prevent flames from spreading across tightly packed wooden shops? Maybe Diagon Alley is protected by ancient enchantments, or maybe it's just blind luck. But if magic fails and one wand waver forgets a syllable, Diagon Alley could go up in smoke in seconds. Number 13. Who regulates shop prices in Diagon Alley? The first time Harry walks into Diagon Alley, he stares at piles of gold and silver. It's overwhelming, but no one ever explains how much things should cost. A wand is 7 galleons, a cauldron is 15. A set of robes? 3. Why those numbers? Who decides? There's no sign of the Ministry regulating anything. It feels like every shopkeeper sets prices based on mood or magic, or worse, on the customer's face. Take Ollivander, for example. He charges the same for a wand, whether it's unicorn hair or phoenix feather. That might sound fair until you realize phoenix feathers are almost extinct. Harry's wand, twin to Voldemort's, is beyond rare. But Ollivander just says, curious, very curious, and hands it over for 7 galleons like it's any other stick. In a world where rarity is everything, how can that price make sense? Or look at Flourish and Blots. During Harry's second year, Gilderoy Lockhart forces students to buy an entire collection of his books. That's over a dozen volumes, no discounts, no used copies, just forced purchases for profit. The rest of you, Lockhart beams, will need all my books. The store doesn't object, neither does Hogwarts. So who's protecting magical families from scams? Clearly not the Ministry. And then there's the joke shop. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes sells screaming snack boxes, puking pastilles, and Peruvian instant darkness powder, highly experimental, possibly dangerous items, With no visible licensing, safety labels, or price limits. They charge what they want. People pay. But if Fred and George can do that, what's stopping others from selling essential goods like healing potions or spellbooks for 10 times the cost during a crisis? Nothing. Because in Diagon Alley, profit is magic and regulation is a myth. Number 14. Why is there no banking competition? Gringotts stands alone. The only bank in the wizarding world run entirely by goblins, hidden beneath the cobbled stones of Diagon Alley. From Arthur Weasley with his nearly empty vault, to Lucius Malfoy guarding treasures deep below the surface, every wizard relies on this single institution. No rivals, no alternatives, just one entrance, one path, one system of trust or fear. It's strange, isn't it? In a world full of magical solutions, there's only one place to keep your money safe. Why hasn't another bank ever opened? Is it fear of the goblins? They're not exactly known for their hospitality. When Harry visits Gringotts for the first time in Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid warns him, "They say there's dragons guarding the high-security vaults. Gringotts is the safest place there is, except maybe Hogwarts." That reputation alone may have crushed all competition before it began. What wizard would dare challenge a goblin's grip on gold? But this monopoly creates terrifying problems. When Bellatrix's vault is compromised in Deathly Hallows, it becomes clear how fragile the system truly is. One vault, once thought impenetrable, overrun by intruders and breeding cursed treasure. What if someone like Molly Weasley lost her vault key, or if someone vanished under a curse and their vault became unreachable? There are no backup systems, no duplicate access, no magical customer service, just cold goblin stares and piles of gold that might never see daylight again. The deeper question remains, is the Ministry of Magic protecting Gringotts' monopoly? Perhaps it's not just fear, but law. Maybe a quiet agreement exists, one that keeps goblins wealthy, wizards obedient, and change impossible. A young entrepreneur like Lee Jordan couldn't just open Wizard Bank & Co. next to quality Quidditch supplies. That door has been shut for centuries, and behind it, the goblins smile in silence. Number 15. Why are Muggle technologies completely ignored? Of all the questions that swirl like chimney smoke above the rooftops of Diagon Alley, there is one that refuses to settle. It hovers, uncomfortable and half-formed, behind every brick archway and flickering lamppost. Why, in a world as advanced in magic as this, are the simplest Muggle technologies still absent? Diagon Alley remains as it always was, enchanting, mysterious, and entirely out of time. Wizards wear robes in an era of denim and polyester. They send owls instead of emails. Even the most basic comforts, like refrigerators, elevators, and typewriters, are nowhere to be found. One might understand their absence in a cottage tucked away in the woods, but not in the heart of wizarding commerce. This rejection of Muggle technology is not just aesthetic, it's systemic. The leaky cauldron, that beloved gateway between the worlds, remains dimly lit with oil lamps despite the wizarding world's undeniable capacity for magical illumination. Madame Malkin's robe shop still uses tape measures that float and dart instead of something as efficient as a scanning device. And Gringotts, the bastion of magical banking, makes no use of any form of magical automation, relying instead on goblins and carts that rattle through archaic tunnels as though progress were a threat to tradition. Take, for example, St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. It exists in the shell of an abandoned department store, camouflaged with a bit of enchantment. Yet for all its potions and charms, one cannot ignore the glaring absence of technology that, in the Muggle world, saves lives daily. There are no MRI machines, no defibrillators, no IV drips. When Arthur Weasley was attacked by Nagini and brought to St. Mungo's, the healers relied on stitches and blood-replenishing potions, a peculiar blend of modernity and medievalism. I don't know why they don't stitch people up the Muggle way, Arthur had mused, in Order of the Phoenix. Much easier. But even he, a member of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, had no clear answer. The Ministry of Magic itself is no better. Endless parchment quills and self-inking pens clutter desks. The entire legal and bureaucratic machinery of the wizarding world appears allergic to paperclips and printers. The process of communication is astonishingly slow. Interdepartmental memos are literally enchanted paper airplanes. Surely even the most obstinate wizard could agree that a filing cabinet enchanted to find documents by keyword would be more efficient. But the preference for tradition remains ironclad. It is not efficiency that drives wizarding culture, it is a fierce, almost zealous loyalty to magical purity. There is no denying the influence of blood ideology in this technological abstinence. Wizards like Lucius Malfoy scoff not only at Muggle-borns, but at anything bearing the scent of Muggle innovation. In this, the rejection of technology becomes political. To embrace a refrigerator is, in some unspoken way, to legitimize Muggle ingenuity. And if wizards have built their identities on being superior, then even the finest surgical laser becomes a threat to that illusion. Better to cast a warming charm on your food than to admit that a machine could do it more reliably. One cannot help but wonder why no enterprising wizard has stepped forward to bridge the divide. Surely someone with the business acumen of Fred and George Weasley, who turned a joke shop into an empire, might have considered marketing magical appliances infused with Muggle concepts, a broomstick that vacuums carpets, a cauldron that stirs automatically with programmable settings, a typewriter that responds to voice commands. And yet Diagon Alley remains static, timeless not by design but by choice. Consider the curious case of Arthur Weasley, the one man in the Ministry openly fascinated by Muggle inventions. His love for plugs, batteries, and telephones was well documented and often ridiculed. His children found his enthusiasm amusing, bordering on embarrassing. But what if the problem wasn't Arthur's eccentricity, but the society that dismissed his ideas? In Chamber of Secrets, when Lucius Malfoy mocks Arthur for his interest in Muggle artifacts, it becomes clear that curiosity itself is a form of rebellion in this world. Arthur might have been a pioneer had he been taken seriously, but he was relegated to a minor office with little funding, his enthusiasm treated as an indulgence rather than innovation. Even Hogwarts, the institution responsible for educating young witches and wizards, perpetuates this divide. Electricity fails to function on its grounds, we are told, as magic interferes with electrical currents. Yet this explanation feels less like a law of physics and more like a convenient excuse. After all, magic can enchant objects to sing, dance, and converse. Why can it not stabilize a circuit? The truth may be simpler. The magical world has never tried hard enough. Hogwarts teaches transfiguration and arithmancy, but no engineering, potions and divination, but no practical application of non-magical science. When Hermione Granger invented SPEW, she encountered resistance, not because her ideas were flawed, but because they threatened cultural norms. In the same way, the idea of integrating Muggle technology challenges the wizarding world's view of itself. Wizards see themselves as separate, as superior. Adopting Muggle tools would be an admission of equality, or worse, dependence. This quiet prejudice runs deep, even among those who fight against blood purity. Albus Dumbledore himself, for all his wisdom, never once questioned the lack of technological progress. The great defenders of justice remained bound to candles and fireplaces. Yet there is no inherent reason magic and technology could not coexist. In fact, the two might thrive in tandem. A printing press, charmed to correct spelling and grammar, a laptop powered by magical energy, resistant to hacking or data loss, a subway system operating beneath Diagon Alley, charmed to remain unseen. But these ideas remain speculative dreams. The wizarding economy does not reward innovation in this direction. Flourish and Blots continues to sell hand-bound books, as though the printing revolution never occurred. Aelop's Owl Emporium remains essential, despite the glaring inefficiency of Owlpost in a world where magical teleportation exists. Number 16. Who maintains order in Diagon Alley? In the heart of wizarding London lies Diagon Alley, a place that pulses with life, laughter, and magic. Cobblestone streets echo with the sound of hurried footsteps as witches and wizards bustle from shop to shop, parchment lists in hand, collecting wands, robes, cauldrons, and the occasional novelty item from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Children press their noses to display windows, mesmerized by dancing chocolate frogs or exploding bonbons. The scent of freshly brewed potions mixes with the aroma of baked pumpkin pasties. Yet beneath this enchanting chaos lurks a peculiar silence, a silence not of sound but of oversight. No auras, no magical law enforcers, no members of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement walk these streets. No one in uniform patrols the alley. And as the crowd thickens, a troubling question emerges. Who keeps order in Diagon Alley? Harry Potter first stepped into Diagon Alley in the Philosopher's Stone, wide-eyed and enchanted. Hagrid led him past shops that gleamed with mysterious wares and magical wonders, but even in this first moment of awe, there was no mention of anyone ensuring the safety of these shoppers. It was assumed that the alley policed itself, a place where the sheer power of mutual respect, or perhaps fear of unseen retaliation, kept things in check. But how sustainable is that? In a world where truth potions, mind-altering charms and invisibility cloaks are common, the absence of an obvious governing force seems like an open invitation for trouble. Fred and George Weasley's joke shop, introduced in The Half-Blood Prince, became a favourite among young witches and wizards. Their products ranged from extendable ears to skiving snack boxes, some charming, others bordering on dangerous. One couldn't help but wonder, who regulates the sale of such unpredictable items? Surely the possibility of magical mischief in the hands of unsupervised teens should warrant oversight. Yet no inspector ever appears. No one issues warnings. Weasley's Wizard. Wheezes flourishes, not under the gaze of regulation, but seemingly under an unspoken code. But what happens when that code is broken? There is an oft-forgotten incident in the Chamber of Secrets when Harry ends up in Knockturn Alley, the dark sibling of Diagon Alley. He's jostled among shady figures and led into Borgin and Burke's, where cursed objects sit plainly on shelves. The proximity of this place to Diagon Alley is unsettling. Just a few turns and one could wander from a candy shop to a den of dark magic. What stops criminals from slipping between the two worlds? Certainly not physical barriers or surveillance. The two alleys exist side by side and the line between them is blurred. That such proximity exists without protective boundaries suggests either extreme confidence in the inherent goodness of wizards or a hidden force that quietly prevents things from spiraling out of control. When the Death Eaters rose to power, Diagon Alley changed. In The Half-Blood Prince, it became a shell of its former self. Stores were boarded up, shoppers wary, the joy snuffed out of the street. Even Ollivander's wand shop, one of the most venerable establishments, was raided, and the old wand-maker kidnapped. If Diagon Alley had protectors, they failed to act. No one stepped in, no force intervened. The alley was vulnerable, its charm shattered. It was only after Voldemort's fall that life returned, slowly, to the cobblestones. But the question remains, how could such a public space, so vital to the magical community, be left so exposed? The closest figure of authority ever hinted at is Gringotts Bank. The goblins run their own security, famously strict, often brutal, and focused solely on their interests. In the Philosopher's Stone, Griphook notes, you'd be mad to try and rob it. And yet even Gringotts was infiltrated twice, suggesting that even the most fortified location in Diagon Alley is not impervious. More importantly, the goblins don't care about outside affairs. A pickpocket in front of Flourish and Blots would be of no concern to them. Theirs is a sovereignty separate from wizard kind. They do not patrol the streets. Flourish and Blots, where Gilderoy Lockhart once held a book signing, descended into chaos during that very event. Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley nearly brawled in front of reporters and families. No one intervened. Not a single official appeared. This public scuffle involving influential members of society and children, including Harry himself, was witnessed by dozens. It demonstrated quite clearly that Diagon Alley had no mechanism for conflict resolution. People fought, books flew, and then everyone went home. In any other society, that would have raised alarm. In Diagon Alley, it passed as an amusing anecdote. Why? Let us not forget the daily vulnerabilities. The sheer number of magical potions, hexing items, and spellbooks sold openly could easily be abused. What if a customer slipped a love potion into someone's drink? What if a child bought a curse book disguised as a prank? In Half-Blood Prince, Ron is nearly killed by a bottle of poisoned mead, originally meant for Dumbledore. The origin? An ordinary shop transaction. It shows how easily deadly items can circulate in plain sight. Yet the vendors continue selling them. There is no registration of magical weapons, no licenses, no background checks, just gold exchanged for danger. Madame Malkin's robe shop once saw a sharp-tongued confrontation between Draco Malfoy and Harry. Again, no mediation, no attempt at preventing conflict. The assumption that shopkeepers will manage these events themselves seems idealistic. Some vendors, like Madame Malkin, may step in out of decorum. Others, like the proprietor of Nocturne Alley's Borgin and Burke's, might encourage disorder. Without standardized oversight, it all depends on the personal ethics of each shop owner. This is not a system, it's a gamble. Number 17. How does Diagon Alley work on an international scale? Of all the mysterious places hidden in the wizarding world, Diagon Alley stands as one of the most iconic. Cobbled streets, crooked buildings, and shelves packed with magical goods, this tight corner of London acts as the beating heart of magical Britain's commerce. But beneath the charm of flourish and blots and the chaotic glory of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes lies a question few dare to ask. How far does the influence of Diagon Alley truly stretch? Because if Hogwarts is just one school among many, what place does Diagon Alley hold in a world with countless magical cultures? The first time Harry walks through the leaky cauldron into Diagon Alley, he's transported into an ecosystem built on tradition and necessity. Gringotts stands as the financial spine of the community, while Ollivanders commands an almost divine reverence in Wandlore. Apothecaries, robe shops, and magical instrument dealers line the alley, all catering to the needs of British witches and wizards. Yet, in Goblet of Fire, the illusion of an insular British magical world is shattered. Visitors from Durmstrang and Beauxbatons arrive, bringing with them accents, customs, and attire from across the continent. And yet, not once is the subject of international commerce addressed. Consider this. Victor Krum, an international Quidditch star from Bulgaria, attends Durmstrang, a school whose location remains shrouded in secrecy, but is somewhere in the far north. He brings a wand of hornbeam and dragon heartstring, crafted not by Ollivander, but by an unknown Eastern European wand maker. The implication is clear. Every magical culture has its own artisans, suppliers, and markets. So where do the students of Durmstrang buy their school supplies? Is there a northern equivalent of Diagon Alley tucked away in a frostbitten corner of a Slavic capital? The same question applies to Beauxbatons. Fleur Delacour carries herself with the grace of French nobility, her wand a 9.5 inches inflexible, rosewood and Vila hair creation. Ollivander himself admits he never uses Vila hair, too temperamental. This suggests that Fleur's wand was purchased in France, likely from a native wand maker. Here we find another gap in Diagon Alley's global reach. If such skilled artisans exist across the world, then Ollivander's is not the only pillar of wand lore, and Diagon Alley is not the sole hub for magical goods. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander travels from Britain to New York, carrying a suitcase of enchanted creatures and documents that would be considered contraband in many countries. He's arrested almost immediately upon arrival, and Macusa's auras treat him like a threat. But more intriguing than Newt's legal woes is the revelation that America has its own infrastructure. The Magical Congress of the United States of America functions as an autonomous government. But where are its shops, its apothecaries, its bookstores? The film gives us only glimpses, a magical speakeasy, a few dark market trades, and a passing mention of wand permits. Diagon Alley has no presence in the New World. Students at Ilvermorny, the North American School of Magic located on Mount Greylock, surely require supplies. They must need textbooks, wands, potions, ingredients, uniforms, and magical instruments. So where do they shop? If there were a Diagon Alley in America, wouldn't we have seen it or heard of it by now? J.K. Rowling's writings about Ilvermorny suggest that the school was founded by Isolde Sayre, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin who fled from Europe to escape persecution. Isolde brought with her 2 stolen wands from the infamous Gormleth Gaunt. Her children and adopted students grew up with a blend of Irish and Native American magical traditions, meaning the foundation of Ilvermorny did not rely on British infrastructure, and therefore neither on Diagon Alley nor on its artisans. One might then wonder whether Diagon Alley is just a local phenomenon, a specifically British creation born out of necessity and colonial history. Indeed, the very name Diagon Alley hints at linguistic cleverness rooted in English, a pun on diagonally. Would such wordplay even make sense in France or Bulgaria or Japan? Would a wizarding street in Kyoto be called something punning in Japanese, serving its local community with as much cultural specificity as Diagon Alley does for the UK? We must also ask how magical goods are traded across borders. In Chamber of Secrets, Arthur Weasley is accused by Lucius Malfoy of introducing Muggle Protection Act that interfere with traditional wizarding trade. If the British Ministry regulates even domestic magical commerce, then international trade must be even more complex. Does the International Confederation of Wizards regulate imports and exports? Are there magical tariffs? Is there a customs office at Gringotts for contraband charms and cursed objects? The series never tells us, but the logistics of such a system must exist. Diagon Alley cannot possibly be the single source of supplies for a global wizarding community. And yet, despite its limitations, Diagon Alley seems to retain a certain reverence. When the Triwizard Tournament is hosted at Hogwarts, visiting delegations from Durmstrang and Beauxbaton don't bring their own trunks of potion ingredients or protective artifacts. They rely on Hogwarts provision, and perhaps by extension, Diagon Alley. This could mean that Diagon Alley has a role as a premium brand, one that foreign wizards might visit for luxury or tradition, much like tourists visiting Harrods in London. Still, this doesn't answer the question of how less privileged communities acquire magical goods. Not every country is wealthy. Do magical markets reflect geopolitical inequalities? Are there poor wizarding neighborhoods in the developing world where goods are scarce and spells passed down orally? If Diagon Alley represents a form of elite magical capitalism, then perhaps other countries develop black markets, informal exchange systems, or locally sourced magical solutions that reject global trade entirely. Number 18. Why do shop magic levels vary so wildly? There is a peculiar sensation when one steps across the threshold of Ollivanders. The air thickens, dust dances in sunlight that isn't entirely natural. Thousands of wands sleep in their boxes like silent sentinels, waiting to be stirred. The walls creak not with age, but with presence. Something watches, something remembers. Even first-time visitors know they have crossed into something alive. Harry Potter himself felt it the moment he entered. The very dust and silence in the shop seemed to tingle with some secret magic. That is not ambience, that is enchantment, ancient and intact. Why then do other shops just a few doors away feel so painfully ordinary? Diagon Alley is a marvel of magical commerce, yet not all of its stores radiate that wondrous energy. Take scribblous writing instruments, for instance. It's functional, clean, stocked with the essentials of parchment, ink and quills, but the shelves do not hum, the windows do not whisper. The shop feels like a corner store, not a nexus of wizarding culture. No ancient power wraps around the building. Its walls don't pulse, its ceiling doesn't breathe. There is magic in the wares, certainly, but the shop itself is mute. Consider the difference with Borgin and Burke's in Nocturne Alley. That place radiates something more sinister, something darker and hungrier than Ollivander's, but still undeniably potent. The artifacts speak in rusted tongues, cursed objects reach for unwitting hands. Even the shadows in that shop seem to gather in conspiracy. The magic there isn't simply contained in the products, it has leached into the walls, the floorboards, the very soul of the structure. It feeds on fear and secrecy. That kind of magic cannot be bought or borrowed. So why this disparity? Why do some shops in Diagon Alley shimmer with immersive enchantment while others barely register above the threshold of the magical? One might argue it depends on the wizard who owns the shop. Certainly Garrick Ollivander, the finest wand-maker in the world, carries a magical pedigree few can rival. His family has been in the business since 382 BC, and the shop has passed from generation to generation. Could it be that with each passing century, the very bricks absorb the residue of craft and legacy? The wand shop is not just a place of sale, it is a sacred space, as revered as Gringotts or Hogwarts itself. But legacy alone doesn't explain everything. Fred and George Weasley, fresh out of school and barely adults, managed to create a shop, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, that positively exploded with magical innovation. Joke items swirled mid-air, shelves rearranged themselves, enchanted mannequins performed pratfalls to lure in crowds. Their magic was fresh, irreverent, chaotic, and yet profoundly present. This wasn't inherited magic. This was youthful brilliance, woven into every fibre of the business. The shop became a character of its own. It laughed, it dared, it glittered. That too is power. Then there's Flourish and Blots, the bookstore that should be a palace of magical knowledge. Yet the atmosphere feels subdued. Books sit politely on shelves, only rarely flapping or snarling. There are exceptions, a biting copy of the Monster Book of Monsters here, a shrieking autobiography there, but the store feels like it is holding its breath. This is the curious paradox, surrounded by knowledge yet cloaked in dormancy. Why has the magic seeped into its walls? Is it possible that knowledge alone is not enough to enchant a space? Plausible theory emerges from magical architecture. Some believe that Diagon Alley itself is laced with ley lines, those invisible currents of magical energy that cross the earth like veins. Certain locations intersect with these lines, forming nodes of concentrated power. Ollivander's may very well rest on one such node, Borgin and Burke's another. These aren't just lucky placements, they are the product of deliberate, ancient, magical surveying. Wizards who understood Earth's deeper currents chose those spots carefully. Perhaps Garrick Ollivander did not simply inherit a building, he inherited a magical beacon. But if ley lines are the answer, why didn't others build accordingly? Why not place every store on a nexus of magical power? The answer may lie in access and secrecy. Ley line locations are rare, protected, and fiercely contested. Not every wizard can afford such prime arcane real estate. Moreover, most shopkeepers are not magical theorists. They open stores to sell cauldrons, robes, or pets, not to commune with planetary energies. The average magical merchant may simply not understand the metaphysical possibilities of magical architecture. Even so, some shops choose to remain mundane. Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions, for example, is a well-lit, respectable place. It is clean, well-staffed, and predictably magical in its offerings. Robes that adjust to size, cloaks that deflect minor spills, buttons that shimmer with modest enchantments. Yet the shop itself feels flat. The mannequins don't speak. The mirrors aren't snarky. It's a store that serves a purpose, not an experience. One suspects that Madame Malkin values efficiency over immersion. Magic, to her, is a tool, not a personality. This introduces the idea that magic may only embed itself in places where it is invited. Ollivander's shop pulses with life because it was crafted to do so. Every beam, every floorboard, every wand box was placed with intention. The Weasley twins infused their shop with deliberate joy and cleverness. But a utilitarian approach repels ambient enchantment. A shop that sees magic as a function rather than a force may never attract the deeper layers of mystery. Another compelling case is Aelop's Owl Emporium. It could have been a wonderland of avian magic, owls that deliver dreams, feathers that shimmer with prophecy, cages that vanish when touched. Instead, the shop is cramped and smells of feathers and droppings. Owls hoot, cages rattle. But the place is more pet store than portal. This may again reflect the vision of its owners. Perhaps they are simply merchants. Perhaps their goal is sales, not spectacle. Contrast this with magical menagerie, where the creatures seem to twitch with mischief and arcane energy. Crookshanks, Hermione's half-Kneazle, was found there, and even Hagrid remarked on the strangeness of that beast. The shop doesn't just house magical animals, it listens to them. The shelves have scratches, the floorboards groan, the building is complicit. This suggests that when living magic is respected and encouraged, the building begins to mirror it. The store becomes an organism. The invisibility of this magical hierarchy may also be cultural. In the wizarding world, status is rarely displayed through wealth or logos. It manifests in magical depth. A shop that breathes magic sends a message. We are not merely sellers, we are keepers of arcane tradition. This places Ollivanders, Flourish and Blots, and even Weasley's Wizard Wheezes in a tier far above the utilitarian vendors of scales, inkpots, or broomstick polish. It is a quiet elitism, an architectural aristocracy. Gringotts is another anomaly. Its goblin-built corridors are humming with ancient protections. The walls don't just guard, they remember. This is no accident. Goblins craft with different magic, deep and ceremonial. Their enchantments are not flamboyant, but they are permanent. A bank that holds the vaults of wizards must itself be invulnerable to time and intrusion. Its very bones are laced with anti-theft charms and blood-binding spells. Again, the purpose shapes the magic. The question remains, could a mundane shop evolve into a magical one over time? The answer perhaps lies in apothecaries. Early potion shops in Knockturn Alley began as humble businesses, but over centuries of grinding bezoars, bottling moonstone, and slicing roots under candlelight, something changed. The walls grew responsive, the cauldrons shimmered before use. Even the air grew dense with unspoken knowledge. Time, it seems, is a crucial ingredient. With enough years and enough passion, any place may awaken. Yet time alone is not enough. Flourish and Blots has been in operation for decades, if not centuries, and it still feels sterile. This brings us to the final possibility. Not all magic is equal. Some magic seeks spectacle, some prefers silence, some magic yearns to leap and laugh and explode in colour. Other kinds are secretive, solemn, restrained. The magic of potion brewing or wand lore is inherently more immersive than that of parchment selling. Perhaps it is the nature of the craft itself that determines whether a shop will rise or sleep. To walk through Diagon Alley, then, is to stroll through a spectrum of enchantment. Every building, every signpost, every squeaky hinge is telling a story, not just of what is sold, but of who dreamed it. A wand shop can whisper because wands are born of living magic. A joke shop can roar with laughter because laughter is a kind of spell. But a place that sells jars and jars of beetle eyes may never feel alive unless the person behind the counter believes it could be. It is no accident that Harry Potter's first immersion in the magical world began at Ollivanders. That shop wasn't just a merchant stop, it was a prophecy chamber. The wand chose the wizard, and in doing so revealed the truth. Some places in Diagon Alley are meant to change lives, others are just meant to serve them. And so without a sign or decree, an invisible pecking order rises. There is no ministry document to define this magical hierarchy. No textbook from Hogwarts lists which shops are considered alive and which are not. And yet every witch and wizard, from first year to ancient professor, feels the difference. One shop pulls you in like a dream. Another nudges you out like a cashier. It is not about spells. It is about soul. And so the next time you stroll past a quiet storefront with dusty windows, ask yourself, is the shop asleep because it lacks magic or because no one ever believed it deserved to wake? Number 19. Why is there no school for young wizards? Every child in the wizarding world waits for that day when the owl arrives with a letter sealed in emerald ink. At 11, their life shifts from the mundane to the magical, and they are whisked away to Hogwarts, the greatest school of witchcraft and wizardry in Britain. But what happens before that moment? What fills the long, formative years before a wand is officially placed into a child's hand? For a world steeped in magic, the silence on early magical education is deafening, and nowhere is this more visible than in Diagon Alley, the white, bustling heart of magical commerce. Its cobblestone paths echo with footsteps of witches, wizards, and enchanted creatures, but among its many shops and spell-filled windows, there is a curious absence. No school, no creche, no preparatory institute for young magical minds. In the world of Muggles, no such void exists. Before the age of 11, children attend nurseries, primary schools, daycare centres, and activity clubs. Development is monitored, talents are encouraged, social skills are honed. But in the wizarding world, the assumption seems to be that magical children simply wait. They play in kitchens while cauldrons bubble, learn their letters from charmed quills on kitchen tables, and perhaps, if lucky, receive occasional guidance from an older sibling or a patient parent. But what of those born to busy households or magical parents working at the ministry? What of the child who shows early signs of accidental magic, and no one knows how to soothe or guide them? The truth is, the wizarding world has long left these questions unspoken, hidden behind the grandeur of Hogwarts. Diagon Alley, with its Gringotts Bank, apothecaries, and wand-makers, is a place where magic breathes. It is the face of the magical world. Here one might expect a sparkling little building, with open doors for magical toddlers, a place where 3-year-olds learn levitation safety, or 6-year-olds practice their first controlled flicks of spell-less wand movements, a supervised space to prepare them for the storm of spells that awaits at Hogwarts. But the shops offer only goods. There is no sign of a teaching institution, no chalkboards or floating letters, no laughter of children in classrooms. Even Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, chaotic and filled with youthful energy, offers nothing but amusement, not education. The Ministry of Magic seems content with this silence. While they regulate the use of underage magic under the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, there is no public policy about early magical education, no department for foundational instruction, no curriculum for pre-Hogwarts learning. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, ever busy with the consequences of untrained magic, rarely addresses the roots of these mishaps. Instead of prevention, the wizarding world leans heavily on reaction. It's as if magic to them is not a subject to be taught gently from birth, but a wild force to be tamed only after 11. Consider the case of Ariana Dumbledore, the younger sister of Albus Dumbledore. When a group of Muggle boys saw her performing uncontrolled magic, they attacked her. The trauma left her scarred and unstable. Her magic turned inward and erupted in fits. It's a tragic tale, well known, often pitied, but rarely dissected for its educational implications. What if Ariana had had access to a structured magical preschool? What if trained instructors had recognized her signs and gently introduced her to magical safety? The Dumbledore family paid the price of a system that prefers secrecy and suppression to early learning and care. Even magical parents seem oddly resigned to this void. Molly Weasley, mother to 7 magical children, appears to have home-taught her children before they entered Hogwarts. She mentions teaching them reading and basic domestic magic, but there is no sign that she relied on any external structure. "Your father and I were so proud," she says to Ginny as she boards the train for her first year. But pride is not a substitute for proper guidance. What of families without time, patience, or knowledge to handle a magically volatile 5-year-old? Hogwarts itself is designed to assume no prior magical knowledge. First-year students are taught everything from scratch: how to hold a wand, pronounce incantations, mix simple potions. That makes the school inclusive, yes, but it also reveals the absence of a broader magical education infrastructure. The children who arrive have raw power but little control. Accidental magic is expected but not refined. They're thrown into potions with Severus Snape and spells with Flitwick with little buffer. Why does no institution step in earlier? One might imagine that such a place could exist in Diagon Alley, so central, so filled with magical citizens. A modest institution tucked behind Flourish and Blots, perhaps. A cosy house where spell-safe crayons draw on walls that erase themselves, where young witches learn to share magical toys that float, and young wizards are taught not to vanish their own eyebrows. A place to prepare for the social and magical leap into Hogwarts. Instead, Diagon Alley focuses on the commercial. It grooms students at 11 with uniforms, books and pets, but offers no pathway before. Some whisper of private tutors for elite families. The Malfoys, for instance, are unlikely to have left Draco's early magical instruction to chance. Narcissa, with her poised demeanour, and Lucius, ever proud, would have secured the best, perhaps goblin-invented memory games or charmed etiquette instruction. But those are the privileges of the wealthy. Most wizarding children are not born into gold-lined cradles. They are raised by parents who juggle potions and paper-pushing jobs at the ministry. Where do those children learn magical responsibility? We must also consider the danger. Children born into magic are not harmless. There are stories in wizarding households, passed in hush and laughter, about toddlers turning toys into snakes, floating themselves to ceilings, vanishing the family cat. These tales are charming until someone is hurt. Without safe environments to teach restraint, these accidents become memories or tragedies. There is no magical child-proofing kit sold in Diagon Alley, no wand safety for families manual in Flourish and Blots. The magical world relies on tradition, not training, on familial guidance, not formal instruction. It would not take much. Even a modest enchanted daycare could change lives. Imagine an establishment run by Madame Pince in her pre-Hogwarts years, a place with floating storybooks and charm-resistant walls. Picture young witches and wizards building social skills, learning to contain their emotions so magic doesn't burst uncontrolled. Picture healers from St. Mungo's consulting on child-safe magical therapies. This is not fantasy, it is necessity. And yet, Diagon Alley does not rise to meet this need. The leaky cauldron is the gateway, but it leads only to commerce. Madame Malkin sells robes in all sizes, but not a school uniform for a 6-year-old. Flourish and Blots offers advanced tomes, but no magical alphabet book for beginners. The world assumes that childhood is something to be hidden away until the moment of formal admission to Hogwarts. Until the letter arrives, the world pretends the child is not yet magical. Even Muggle-born children face this vacuum. Hermione Granger, whose intellect dazzled every professor, had no magical training before Hogwarts. She read books obsessively, but none could give her hands-on experience. She arrived brilliant, but unpracticed. The ministry provides no outreach, no basic orientation for Muggle-born families. A child might show early signs, levitating objects, transforming dolls, and the magical world remains silent. Until the letter, until the train, until the sorting hat. The logic is outdated. In a world where portraits talk and time-turners exist, surely a magical preparatory school is within reach. Why not begin at age 5 with magical ethics? Teach them why casting spells on animals is wrong. Teach magical empathy. Why wait until 11 to talk about werewolves, ghosts and basilisk survival? When the world is dangerous and complicated, education must begin earlier, not later. And what of magical development? If wands are an extension of the wizard, if magic is linked to emotion and will, then why not guide that bond from early childhood? Why not build confidence and understanding? Instead, magical children are left to navigate their powers alone, accidental and often frightened, until the world finally decides they are worthy of Hogwarts. Until then, they are magical, in secret, unacknowledged, half-formed. Albus Dumbledore, in his wisdom, once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." But choices are taught, moral grounding is shaped. In a world where children are capable of wandless outbursts, of accidental destruction, of spontaneous transformations, it is dangerous to assume they will learn restraint without instruction. A society that values magic should also value magical education from the very beginning. There are rumours, of course. Some say that in Hogsmeade, hidden behind enchanted stones, lies a private preschool for magical children of the North. Others claim that certain squib-run households offer safe learning spaces for magical toddlers, away from the eyes of the ministry. These are tales, not policies, whispers, not institutions. The fact that they are secrets only emphasizes the gap. The magical world, for all its power, leaves its youngest to chance. Perhaps the answer lies in fear. Fear that too early a magical education might corrupt, that powers honed too soon may birth arrogance or recklessness. Perhaps there is an ancient superstition that formal training before Hogwarts is unlucky. But then again, fear is not reason, fear is not safety, and fear does not excuse inaction. The Muggle world may be slower, but it builds foundations. The magical world assumes strength will blossom on its own. If Diagon Alley wishes to be more than a marketplace, if it wishes to be a heart of the magical community, it must evolve. It must see its children not as future customers, but as present lives in need of guidance. It must answer the question that echoes louder each year. Why is there no school for young witches and wizards before they turn 11? Why do we wait when magic does not? The cobblestones of Diagon Alley have witnessed centuries of history. They have heard laughter, footsteps, cries, explosions, but never the gentle chanting of nursery rhymes or the squeal of toddlers learning to control their first flickering bursts of power. It is time for that to change. The alley is long, the space is there, the children are waiting, and magic, as always, is watching. Number 20. Who decides what kinds of shops can open? Diagon Alley is a marvel of magical commerce, bustling with the charm of cobblestones and whispered enchantments, yet it reveals an uncanny uniformity. One stroll through its winding path shows a perfect school supply list brought to life. Ollivanders for wands, Flourish and Blots for books, Madame Malkins for robes, Elops for owls, and the apothecary for potion ingredients. Every shop fits like a puzzle piece in a predetermined design, and nothing ever sticks out. It's as if the entire alley exists for one purpose only, to prepare students for Hogwarts. But then the question arises, who decides this? Who enforces this magical zoning law that seems to prohibit a whimsical cafe with self-refilling teacups or a store dedicated to enchanted musical instruments that play by emotion rather than touch? There are countless examples of magical ingenuity in the wizarding world that never find a storefront in Diagon Alley. Take the Flooper, for instance, a bird whose song drives listeners mad. It's sold with a silencing charm and a license, a product that would fit beautifully into a shop for magical musicians. But no such shop exists. Instead, these creatures are buried deep in Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures files. The same goes for spell-enhanced instruments like bagpipes that scream or violins that weep. The question is not whether these objects exist. They do. But why they're never sold in the most famous magical marketplace of Britain. The uniformity of Diagon Alley becomes more suspicious when one considers the powerful sway of the Ministry of Magic. A bureaucratic machine that has regulated time-turners, flying carpets, and even the breeding of magical creatures likely has a hand in commercial regulation. Dolores Umbridge once banned certain books from the Hogwarts library. If censorship can reach into education, could it not also stretch its fingers into retail? A ministry decree could easily determine what types of shops are appropriate for the alley, all in the name of safety, tradition, or even propaganda. After all, a shop selling enchanted protest posters or pro-centaur literature would not be welcome near the leaky cauldron. There is also the matter of licenses. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Fred and George Weasley open Weasley's Wizard Wheezes in Diagon Alley, a rare deviation from the Hogwarts supply theme. Their joke shop sold skiving snack boxes, Peruvian instant darkness powder, and puking pastilles, items the ministry later sought to restrict, and yet they had a permit to operate. This suggests that there is in fact a licensing body, likely embedded within the Department of Magical Transportation or Magical Business Regulation, that grants permission to occupy space in the alley. But what are their criteria? Is there a checklist for magical utility, cultural alignment, or simply profit potential? Fred and George's case is particularly telling. The only reason they managed to open their shop was because of their success with mail-order items and the fortune left to them by Harry Potter. They didn't just walk in and hang a sign, they had to earn credibility. Before that, no store in Diagon Alley had dared to be humorous, experimental, or even adolescent. Diagon Alley, J.K. Rowling wrote in Philosopher's Stone, was a cobbled street that twisted and turned out of sight, with shops stacked tightly together, their signs swinging in the breeze. But swinging signs are not swaying freely. They are curated. This invisible hand becomes more obvious when looking at Nocturne Alley, the dark twin of Diagon Alley. Nocturne exists not far away, and yet it's shunned and viewed as improper. It houses Borgin and Burke's, the infamous shop for cursed objects and dark artifacts. But even this district remains singular in its offerings. It's a cautionary tale, an entire commercial street that represents what happens when magical retail goes too far. Is Nocturne the result of deregulation, or is it where rejected shop proposals from Diagon are quietly relocated? The merchants of Diagon Alley, too, seem to accept this status quo without question. Mr. Ollivander has been selling wands for centuries, yet never once do we hear of a rival wand-maker opening a booth down the lane. Madame Malkin has competitors like Twilfit and Tattings, but they are kept at a distance. Why doesn't anyone challenge the monopoly on wands or open a modern robe boutique with levitating mirrors and enchanted fabric that changes colour with mood? The answer may lie in a combination of self-policing tradition and ministry influence. The alley has become a brand, and brands do not tolerate deviation. Consider the curious absence of Muggle-Wizard integration shops. Arthur Weasley famously adored Muggle technology, going so far as to enchant a Ford Anglia to fly. Yet never once do we see a store in Diagon Alley selling enchanted radios, phones, or televisions for wizard use. The closest we get is the Wizarding Wireless Network, but even that is kept out of retail hands. Such devices could revolutionize communication in the magical world. Their absence is not due to lack of demand, but likely due to a resistance to change, enforced either formally through law or informally through tradition. In Order of the Phoenix, the ministry is shown to have full control over the content of the Daily Prophet. They manipulate headlines, smear Albus Dumbledore, and sow fear in the magical population. If the press can be so tightly regulated, it is naive to assume the ministry turns a blind eye to retail. It's likely that Diagon Alley is seen as an extension of public messaging, pure, Hogwarts-approved, and risk-free. Every shop reinforces the idea that magic is structured, teachable, and controllable. Introducing new types of stores might introduce new types of thought. The economic structure of the magical world supports this theory. Without banks beyond Gringotts and without visible investment institutions, magical entrepreneurs likely rely on inheritance or ministry grants. Opening a new store in Diagon Alley would require both funding and permission, and both are controlled by those in power. This would explain why Weasley's Wizard Wheezes was a lightning-in-a-bottle exception, and not the beginning of a new wave of magical retail diversity. The barriers to entry are high, and the gatekeepers are unseen but present. Let us not forget that during the rise of Voldemort, even Diagon Alley itself became a target. In Half-Blood Prince, Rowling writes, several shops had closed down, their windows boarded up. This moment of chaos revealed that the alley was not sacred or eternal. It could change, collapse, or be corrupted. Yet even after the war, when reconstruction was possible and magical Britain had a chance to reinvent itself, Diagon Alley reverted to its old self. No cafes appeared, no instrument shops, just the same old books, robes, wands, and potions. There is also the cultural component to consider. Wizards are notoriously resistant to change, their calendar celebrates ancient rituals, their families uphold bloodlines, and their fashion remains centuries behind. A society that treats time as a cycle rather than a line will resist innovation. Diagon Alley is not just a commercial hub, it is a shrine to magical orthodoxy. Deviating from it would be seen not as entrepreneurship, but as rebellion. The shops are less businesses and more relics of identity. Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlour was one of the few establishments in Diagon Alley that broke this mould. It wasn't a school supply store, it didn't sell textbooks or ingredients, and yet it thrived. For a while. Harry spent hours there during the summer of Prisoner of Azkaban, enjoying Sundays and listening to historical lectures about medieval witch burnings. Fortescue offered an intellectual oasis, combining sweets and knowledge. But his sudden disappearance, reportedly kidnapped by Death Eaters, remains an eerie footnote. Was his shop too unique, too casual, too informative? We are reminded that when Harry first visits Diagon Alley, he is overwhelmed by its wonder, but also by its predictability. Harry wished he had 8 more eyes, the book reads, to look in every direction at once. And yet every direction led him to another piece of the same puzzle. Prepare for Hogwarts, support the system, learn the rules. The alley is awe-inspiring because it mirrors the structure of the magical world, layered, ancient, and closely watched. What appears to be freedom is in fact a curated experience. If we entertain the possibility of a private council of shopkeepers regulating Diagon Alley, that raises further concerns. Such a group would have vested interests in keeping competition low. Why would Mr. Mulpepper, who sells cauldrons, welcome a shop that sells portable potion labs? Why would Madame Malkin want a rival offering customizable robes? The lack of diversity may not only be state-controlled, but market-protected. Like an unspoken guild, the alley protects its own, not by merit, but by history. Hogwarts, too, plays a silent role in this, by requiring only specific items, standard robes, pewter cauldrons, a set list of books. It creates a fixed market. No student needs more than what the list allows. Therefore, any shop diverging from this list becomes commercially risky. Why sell magical jewelry when it's not permitted in school? Why enchant sneakers if Hogwarts doesn't allow them? The school's control over student needs directly translates to control over retail supply. Yet a world where only needs are met is not a world where wonder thrives. Diagon Alley should be a place where creativity runs wild, where magic is more than utility. Instead, it is a regimented supply corridor draped in colour but confined in thought. There is no reason why a store selling enchanted books that tell bedtime stories or a shop filled with magical pets that double as tutors could not exist, except for the shadowy consensus that they mustn't. If ever there was a moment for reinvention, it was after Voldemort's fall. And yet the magical world, scarred but unshaken, chose familiarity. Diagon Alley returned, not reborn, but restored. No whispers of a bookstore with self-recommending tomes, no hint of a music shop where melody bends to mood. It is as though the war, for all its horror, only strengthened the chains of magical convention. The next time someone strolls Diagon Alley, marveling at the windows and twinkling signs, they should ask not just what they see, but what they don't. Every missing shop is a ghost, an idea denied. The alley, as it stands, is not just a magical marketplace, but a mirror of control, tradition, and unspoken law. And somewhere, in a locked drawer of a ministry desk, may lie a crumpled proposal for a magical barbershop, rejected, forgotten, and perhaps a little too dangerous to be allowed. Number 21. Why don't shops use magical advertising? The cobblestones of Diagon Alley whispered with the centuries of tradition, every storefront a relic, every brass doorknob worn by thousands of wizarding hands. And yet, in a world where even the Daily Prophet could wag its headlines, where wizard portraits engaged in gossip and staircases moved of their own will, the shopping heart of magical Britain remained curiously quiet. Ollivander's, with its single wand in the window, never felt the need to proclaim its greatness through magical slogans. Flourish and Blots displayed stacks of books, but never flying tomes swirling to attract young witches and wizards. It seemed that magic, omnipresent in daily life, had chosen silence where it could have sung. The absence of magical advertisements is startling once one notices it. Why didn't Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, one of the most creative shops in the alley, deploy banners that exploded into colour above the heads of passers-by? Why didn't Madame Malkin's dress robes sparkle mid-air above her store, twirling on invisible mannequins in a skyward catwalk? The magical world is rife with enchanted possibilities, but the business end of things feels muted, almost sheepish. The occasional enchanted sign, such as the one at Quality Quidditch Supplies depicting a nimbus racing through clouds, is an exception rather than the norm. Fred and George Weasley came close to breaking this tradition. Their shop, garish and impossible to ignore, did use visual tricks. Their window display included a giant figure vomiting into a bucket of puking pastilles. Yet even they never used moving posters calling customers in, never enchanted sounds to call out sales. It was as if even the wildest minds among wizards obeyed an invisible rule. Magic in business should be modest, subdued, contained. The twins relied more on spectacle once inside rather than shouting from the rooftops. Their success was earned not through shouting but by daring. One might argue that wizarding culture itself frowns upon overindulgence in commercial promotion. Magical society is deeply conservative at its roots, resistant to change, and woven tightly with etiquette and unspoken rules. The respectability of a store is tied to its age, its family ownership, its traditions, not its ability to capture attention. The idea of a magical jingle playing on loop outside Flourish and Blots would likely offend the sensibilities of witches like Professor McGonagall, who valued dignity over display. It's possible that what Muggles call marketing is considered tasteless among the pure-blooded elite. Consider Aelop's Owl Emporium, where the soft hoots of its residents fill the shop with organic sound. The store itself emits no magical song, no projected voice chanting, "Best owls in Britain." Instead, the store speaks through its content. Regal barn owls, tiny scops, and imposing eagle owls, all perched with silent expectation. Its charm lies in the authenticity of its magic, not artificial enchantments. Wizards, perhaps, are drawn to experience and atmosphere, not to persuasion. Another explanation lies in the simple, almost mundane truth. Word of mouth in the magical world is incredibly powerful. A wizard's circle is small, tightly knit, and often centuries old. Families shop where their ancestors shopped. Children buy their first wands from Ollivander's because their great-grandparents did. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Mr. Ollivander remembers every wand he ever sold. That kind of legacy doesn't need fanfare. It needs silence, reverence, memory. Advertising might break that spell. And still there is a paradox. In the same world, moving photographs are common. Magical portraits talk. Newspapers display looping images. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the Daily Prophet boldly flashes animated pictures of Sirius Black on the run. The Ministry of Magic uses enchanted pamphlets to influence public opinion. During wartime, propaganda flows like water, but shopkeepers in Diagon Alley remain curiously silent. Why does politics embrace magical media while commerce retreats from it? One could suppose that the ministry enforces limitations on magical advertisements, perhaps out of fear that too much magical distraction in a concentrated area might be dangerous. Imagine dozens of shops projecting illusions, shouting offers, launching sparks. Chaos could erupt in a heartbeat. The alley is narrow, crowded, and brimming with young witches and wizards. Safety might require silence. There are no documented regulations in the books, but considering the bureaucratic nature of the ministry, some unseen hand may indeed be at work. It is also possible that magical marketing is simply unnecessary. Wizards, unlike muggles, do not suffer from information overload. With a lifespan often extended by potions and a culture driven by interpersonal connections, decisions are rarely impulsive. There's no magical equivalent of buying chewing gum at the checkout counter. Witches and wizards often enter a store with purpose, not on a whim. They do not need to be lured, teased, or tricked. Shopping is a ritual, not a race. This restraint is particularly visible in Ollivanders. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry enters a dim, dusty shop that appears completely unaware of the passage of time. There is no bright light, no musical chime at the door. Mr. Ollivander appears like a ghost, speaking softly, reverently, as though the purchase of a wand is a sacred moment. And perhaps that is the point. In the magical world, commerce is often tied to the arcane. Buying a wand, a pet, even a book on spells is not a transaction. It is initiation. Despite the absence of magical advertisements, Diagon Alley itself is a feast for the senses. The sights, smells, and sounds of the place serve as a passive kind of marketing. The golden glow of cauldrons, the scent of dragon liver wafting from apothecaries, the tinkle of bells on the doors, all invite the visitor to explore. Wizards rely on enchantment by environment, not enchantment by enchantment. In that way, every store competes through mood, not manipulation. Perhaps one of the more ironic aspects is that the most magical advertising in the wizarding world comes from the Daily Prophet, a publication that does not sell goods but ideas. Its headlines shift and blink, its ink dances, and its pictures argue their own points. And yet this same vibrancy is absent in Diagon Alley. It is as if wizardkind draws a moral line. Magic can be used to shape belief, but not desire. One may persuade with magic, but not seduce. There is also the question of trust. Wizards are cautious by nature. They distrust the new. Magical advertising might be viewed not just as vulgar, but dangerous. If a shop's window yells too loudly, perhaps it hides something. If a robe sparkles too brightly, maybe the seams are weak. In this world, understatement is proof of substance. An overly enchanted shop might feel like a trap. And to a people long beset by dark wizards and hidden curses, such suspicion is survival. A curious case is found in Nocturne Alley. Here, advertising is even more subdued and tellingly sinister. Borgin & Burke's has no sign yelling about cursed necklaces or forbidden tomes. It relies on secrecy, on a customer's hushed knowledge. The darker the trade, the quieter the transaction. This silence mirrors Diagon Alley's tone, albeit with a shadowed twist. Magic, in advertising it seems, walks a tightrope between spectacle and suspicion. Moreover, the generational nature of wizarding businesses ensures brand loyalty. Zonko's joke shop in Hogsmeade didn't need flashy signs to entice students. Word of mouth carried its fame from class to class. It is telling that when the Weasleys opened their own shop, their main strategy was not advertisement, but innovation. Customers came because they knew the minds behind the jokes. In magical commerce, personality is the best advertisement. Even Hogwarts, the heart of magical learning, enforces this idea of understated enchantment. There are no posters in the Great Hall promoting brands, no magical commercials interrupting classes. The only exceptions are the Quidditch products shown in catalogues. And even then, the information is factual, not persuasive. It is a culture that prizes learning over selling, mastery over manipulation. One sells what one knows, not what one can shout the loudest. A final theory might lie in the very nature of magic itself. Magic, when overused for mundane purposes, may lose its gravitas. Wizards and witches may instinctively preserve their enchantments for when they matter. Lighting your wand in the dark feels special. If it sang jingles all day, would it still feel like magic? There is an unspoken reverence in the restraint, an acknowledgement that not every moment must sparkle. And yet, one wonders how Diagon Alley might evolve. If younger witches and wizards demand change, if magical entrepreneurship grows bolder, could we someday see the alley transformed? Floating signs announcing discounts on sneakerscopes, talking mannequins modelling robes, animated potion bottles shouting ingredients? The possibilities are endless, but so is the risk of losing something older, quieter, sacred. Diagon Alley thrives, not in spite of its silence, but because of it. Magic hums in the air, but never shouts. The restraint is not a failure of imagination, but a decision rooted in centuries of balance. Magic, after all, is not for triviality. A talking window is clever, but a silent wand that chooses its master. That is wonder. And in that wonder lies the heart of wizarding commerce. In the end, the absence of magical advertisements is not an oversight. It is a philosophy, a code unwritten and unspoken that magic should enhance life, not interrupt it. That even in a world of living portraits and flying brooms, the power of silence is still the most magical thing of all. Number 22, where are the pharmacies and healers? In the heart of wizarding London, nestled behind the leaky cauldron and hidden from the Muggle world, lies Diagon Alley, a vibrant, twisting corridor of magic, colour, and ancient tradition. Its cobbled streets and crooked signs evoke centuries of magical commerce, a living artery of Britain's magical society. There are wand shops and bookstores, owl emporiums and robe tailors, potion ingredient suppliers and joke shops. Yet for all its wealth of goods and charm, one peculiar absence raises an uncomfortable question. Where does a witch or wizard go when they need healing? Not potions ingredients, not charms or trinkets, real healing, the sort required after a cursed object burns your hand or a doxy sinks its fangs into your ankle. Why, in the most central and famous magical shopping district, is there no apothecary dispensing finished medicinal potions, no healer offering consultations, no visible place where urgent care might be found? It is not that the need for healing doesn't exist. Diagon Alley, bustling and chaotic, presents numerous hazards. Fred and George Weasley once filled it with experimental joke products that could easily cause nosebleeds, vomiting, or worse. Nocturne Alley, barely hidden to the side, is a source of dark magic and cursed objects. The very nature of magical commerce, from venomous candles to flying brooms and volatile potions, seems to guarantee accidents, yet there is no visible sign for a magical urgent care, no mention of a healer on duty inside any shop. As readers, we remember Madame Malkin's robes, flourish and blots, Ollivanders, but never a healer's clinic, never a counterselling fever fix or pepper-up potion ready for use. Madame Pomfrey, the school matron at Hogwarts, is perhaps the only consistently named medical professional in the Harry Potter series. Her skill is considerable and her potions seem endless. But Hogwarts is a closed environment, and Pomfrey serves in an institutional capacity. Who then serves the broader wizarding world? Surely not every household is equipped to brew complex healing draughts. The instructions for a proper skelligro or an antidote to a bezoar require training, time, and ingredients not easily accessible to the average wizard. Is every injured shopper expected to stumble home and experiment on themselves? Consider the scene in Chamber of Secrets when Harry loses all the bones in his arm thanks to Gilderoy Lockhart's incompetence. Madame Pomfrey administers scaligro, grimacing at the unpleasant task. "You should have come straight to me," she snapped. "I can mend bones in a second, but growing them back—" But that's precisely the point. Where is the equivalent of Pomfrey in Diagon Alley? If a child trips and breaks a leg in front of quality Quidditch supplies, where are they taken? Are the adults expected to disapparate instantly to St. Mungo's, even if they're alone or in distress? The only medical establishment ever explicitly mentioned in the series is St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, located in a hidden Muggle department store. It is several apparition miles away from Diagon Alley and is not openly advertised in the alley itself. When Mr. Weasley is attacked by Nagini in Order of the Phoenix, he is rushed to St. Mungo's, not by a public system of ambulatory care, but by the internal apparatus of the Ministry of Magic. In other words, unless one has direct connections, medical help is neither immediate nor clearly accessible. Slughorn in Half-Blood Prince once mentions collecting a few drops of venom from an acromantula because it's not often one gets a fresh sample. Potion making, he implies, is an elite skill, one closely guarded and not easily shared. Healing potions, then, are not democratized. They are not sold off the shelf for the average wizard. Even the apothecary in Diagon Alley sells ingredients, not completed potions. Eye of newt, powdered horn, dragon liver, all must be prepared properly. This arrangement presumes a level of competence most shoppers likely do not have. What about tourists, foreign wizards and witches visiting Britain, unfamiliar with local customs or recipes? If a French witch is burned by a cursed music box in Borgin and Berks, is she expected to speak fluent English, explain her symptoms, and request a list of potion ingredients from a dusty shop? What if she's travelling alone? What if she faints? The lack of any public-facing magical medical presence in Diagon Alley is not merely an odd omission, it is a systemic risk. There are admittedly whispers and rumours. Some believe that a backroom of flourish and blots carries rare healing texts with spells banned by the Ministry. Others say that a discreet door behind Aelop's Owl Emporium leads to an underground healer's den, operating without license but offering real care. In fan theories and apocryphal tales, these hidden healers occupy the moral grey zone, tolerated, even relied upon, but never officially acknowledged. But why would such essential services be forced into secrecy? Possible answer lies in the deeply insular and often conservative nature of magical society. The wizarding world is resistant to modernization and efficiency. They still use owls instead of phones, parchment instead of email. Medical practices, too, may be locked in outdated systems. Healing remains a craft, not an industry. It is passed down in families or institutions like Hogwarts or St. Mungo's, but not standardized for the public. The concept of a neighborhood clinic or open-access pharmacy may simply not exist in magical consciousness. There is also a cultural element of self-reliance in the magical world. Wizards are expected to be resourceful. When Ron is poisoned in Half-Blood Prince, it is Harry who saves him, not a healer. There was a clatter as the bottles smashed on the floor. Slughorn looked up. Harry's hand had gone straight to the bezoar in his pocket. He sprinted across the room, shoved Ron aside, and rammed the bezoar down his throat. Even in crisis, even surrounded by adult wizards, the expectation is improvisation, not institutional aid. But this raises ethical concerns. Should children and families be left to fend for themselves in emergencies? Should magical society continue to rely on individual initiative rather than collective systems? The absence of healing infrastructure in a place as central as Diagon Alley exposes a blind spot in the fabric of wizarding life. No matter how quaint or charming the alley appears, its inability to guarantee basic medical help tarnishes its image of safety. The Ministry of Magic, with its extensive control over magical affairs, could in theory establish a healing outpost in Diagon Alley, a small, warded building offering consultations, first aid, or access to emergency portkeys to St. Mungo's. That such an initiative has never been described suggests either negligence or a belief that Diagon Alley doesn't need one. Perhaps injuries there are more common than reported, but covered up by obliviators who erase memories before questions arise. This possibility gains weight when considering the incident with Katie Bell in Half-Blood Prince. After touching a cursed necklace from Borgin and Burke's, she is lifted into the air and nearly dies. Her friend Leanne, terrified, takes her to the school, where McGonagall arranges transport to St. Mungo's. But Katie was attacked while visiting Hogsmeade, not Diagon Alley, but a similarly unregulated magical commercial area. The response again is informal, improvised, and ultimately inadequate. A real system would have included first responders, not terrified students. J.K. Rowling never provides a comprehensive map of Diagon Alley, nor does she comment on its public services. This silence leaves space for speculation, but also criticism. The fantasy of the magical world rests partly on its internal logic, and when essential services are absent without explanation, the illusion wobbles. If the Muggle world has emergency rooms on every corner, why would the Wizarding world, Wabash, with far more dangerous day-to-day objects, lack even a basic infirmary? Moreover, there is a class issue underlying all of this. Wealthy magical families, like the Malfoys, likely have private healers on call. Lucius, well-connected and politically insulated, would never wait in line at St. Mungo's. But what of shopkeepers, goblin clerks, or young apprentices working long hours at the cauldron shops? If a clerk at Scribulus sustains a magical paper cut infected with a sentient ink, who helps them? The disparity is striking. Healthcare, it seems, is as stratified in the magical world as it is in the Muggle one. The irony is bitter. A world where magic can regrow bones, erase scars, and cleanse poisons still lacks a basic infrastructure for urgent care. The spells exist, the potions are real, the knowledge is ancient and vast, but the systems to deliver them to the average citizen are missing. The wizards have mastered time, space, and transformation, but not the simple task of putting a healer where people gather, shop, and live. Perhaps this is a narrative oversight, a byproduct of Rowling's focus on Hogwarts and the individual journeys of her characters. Perhaps the book simply never needed to depict a magical, urgent care. But even within the narrow focus of the story, the gaps are telling. Injuries are common. Healing is essential. And yet, like the dusty corners of Nocturne Alley, the whole subject is quietly avoided. In a way, the absence itself is an answer. The wizarding world, for all its wonders, is not a utopia. It mirrors many of the flaws of the real world: inequality, institutional neglect, resistance to progress. Diagon Alley is beautiful, magical, and dangerous, and like many beautiful, magical, and dangerous places, it leaves its wounded to find their own way home. And so we must ask again, when the next accident occurs, a splintering hex in a wand shop, a venomous puff of powder in the apothecary, a toddler's accidental tumble from a levitating broom, who will be there to help? If not a healer, then who? If not here, then where? And if nowhere, what kind of world have the wizards built? Number 23. Why has Diagon Alley never expanded? The first time Harry Potter set foot in Diagon Alley, he was enchanted. Narrow, cobbled, filled with the clamour of magical wares and the scent of ink, parchment, and dragon liver, it felt like stepping into the very heart of the wizarding world. Flourish and blots overflowed with grimoires. Madame Malkins hummed with floating fabric. The leaky cauldron behind him sealed off Muggle London like a curtain. dropped on the mundane. Yet despite all its magic, despite all the passing years, Diagon Alley never seemed to change, not in 1991, not in 1995, not even in the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War. A place suspended in amber, generations of witches and wizards have passed through its cobblestones, yet the shops remained the same. Ollivanders still squeezes customers into its narrow, wand-filled interior. The apothecary still smells of rot and sage. Quality Quidditch supplies still only offers broomsticks, robes and gear that barely fit modern sport demands, and Gringotts, with its goblin guards and stone grandeur, remains just as aloof and inaccessible. Not one new shop emerges, not one building expands upward or outward. The alley, it seems, is locked in time. The question is why. Some blame preservation magic. There are whispers that the founders of Diagon Alley placed a collective enchantment on its foundations, a binding charm interwoven with blood, intention, and secrecy. It's possible the alley is protected in the same way Hogwarts is hidden from Muggle eyes. But unlike Hogwarts, which evolves in subtle ways and accommodates new ideas like the Tri-Wizard Tournament or modernized lesson plans, Diagon Alley appears cursed with stillness. No new generation of architects has been able to lay so much as a new brick. Fred and George Weasley's store, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, should have been the start of a revolution. Bursting with colour, laughter, and innovation, it dared to be different. "Why are you worrying about you-know-who? You should be worrying about you-know-poo," proclaimed their famous toilet slogan. And yet, even this firecracker of a store didn't signal a wider change. It stood like a bright ink blot on a page of faded parchment. The neighbouring stores remained as musty and grim as ever. Zonko's in Hogsmeade may have closed, but no Diagon Alley equivalents ever dared emerge. A curious thing happened when the wizarding world experienced its post-war boom. A surge of students arrived at Hogwarts, leading to expanded classes and reformed curriculums. Magical law advanced, spearheaded by Hermione Granger at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. New technology like two-way mirrors and enchanted pocket watches began infiltrating the lives of modern wizards. And yet, those wanting to buy an enchanted watch still had to do so in a cramped shop with 17th century displays if they found one at all. Diagon Alley seemed to reject change at its very core. Some suspect the Ministry of Magic has issued silent decrees regarding Diagon Alley's expansion, its status as the primary wizarding marketplace, visible to Muggle London only through the leaky cauldron and accessed through brickwork hidden behind trash bins, may require strict magical boundaries. Perhaps enlarging Diagon Alley risks breaching the statute of secrecy. The more shops you have, the more witches and wizards spilling out, the more likely it is that Muggles will notice. The wizarding world is not built for scaling up, it's built for containment. Lucinda Fortescue, niece of the famed Florian Fortescue, attempted to open a magical art gallery beside the apothecary in 2010. The space existed, the lease was approved, but the gallery vanished within days of its grand opening. The official statement blamed structural instability due to magical compression. Unofficially, older shopkeepers frowned upon the venture. "Not the Diagon way," muttered an unnamed representative from Slug and Jiggers. Lucinda later opened in Nocturne Alley instead, where her paintings of banshees and boggarts thrived in the shadowed quiet. Atmosphere may be Diagon Alley's most sacred currency. To expand it, to add a second floor to Madame Malkin's, or build a modern café in place of the Owl Emporium, would be seen by purists as desecration. Wizards are nostalgic by nature, clinging to customs and rituals older than their wands. Hogwarts letters are still delivered by Owl, even when mirrors can communicate in real time. To change Diagon Alley would be to admit that the past is not perfect. And the wizarding world has always clung, perhaps too tightly, to the illusion of constancy. There are also rumours of Diagon's mirror, its secret twin. Some call it New Diagon. Supposedly hidden far deeper beneath London, accessible only through specific runes and passageways known only to a few, it houses experimental shops, wandmakers outside of Ollivander's line, alchemists defying ministry regulation, and magical devices that blend with Muggle tech. Some claim New Diagon is where George Weasley sends his more dangerous products. Others believe it's where Hermione buys her most obscure books, but the truth is, no one will admit it exists, perhaps because admitting it would be to confess that Diagon Alley is no longer enough. One cannot help but remember that even in the height of Voldemort's terror, Diagon Alley remained eerily unchanged. The shops closed briefly, yes, and the windows darkened, but when the war ended, they reopened as if nothing had happened. Gringotts stood untouched. The cauldrons returned to their windows. Even the owl emporium still chirped and rustled. Trauma passed over the alley like a shadow, not altering its bones, only darkening its skin. If war couldn't change it, what could? Consider the contrast with Hogsmeade, which added cottages and even seasonal events over time, or with the temporary magical encampments at the Quidditch World Cup, which displayed the wizarding world's immense ability to create, adapt and dismantle entire communities at will. Clearly, magical folk are capable of expansion and transformation. Diagon Alley's stagnation is not due to magical limits. It is a cultural choice. The alley also serves as a memory bank. Every brick, every lantern, every twisted iron sign is a nod to a past that has become myth. Students remember their first trip there as a rite of passage. Harry saw his world open for the first time not at Hogwarts but in Diagon Alley. To change it would be to erase part of that collective initiation. For many, it is less a shopping street and more a sacred text, untranslated, untouched. It's no secret that many shopkeepers are descendants of the original founders. Mr. Borgin from Borgin and Burke's was rumoured to be part of the same bloodline that sold cursed necklaces to the Malfoy family centuries ago. Ollivander's lineage goes back to 382 BC. These aren't mere business owners. They are custodians, guardians. Expansion may not just be discouraged, it may be forbidden in their inherited codes. Another theory rests in magic itself. Magical architecture, while magnificent, often resists non-consensual change. The Burrow grew through love and necessity. Grimmauld Place hid itself from Muggle eyes. Hogwarts reconfigures staircases based on need and spirit. Diagon Alley, if bound by old enchantments, may resist all unnatural additions. Perhaps the shops themselves refuse to grow. Magic, after all, has will. It listens. Still not all are satisfied with this stillness. Young witches and wizards, those raised on Muggle-born dreams and hybrid ambition, seek more. The alley does not offer a place to buy portable spell coders, magical photography enhancements, or enchanted devices compatible with Muggle electronics. The divide grows. As the younger generation looks outward, the alley becomes more shrine than solution. The heart of the magical marketplace beats slower with each passing year. There was once a brief push for modernization. In 2018, Leona Macmillan, a half-blood business witch and innovator, proposed the creation of a new annex connected to Diagon Alley. Dubbed the North Vein, it would offer room for new businesses, magical startups, and multicultural magical artifacts. The proposal vanished after her office was raided by magical infrastructure enforcement for violation of zoning rituals. No formal charges were filed, but Leona left Britain soon after. The power behind Diagon Alley's boundaries may be institutional. The Department of Magical Transportation maintains the Floo network access points within the alley. The Department of International Magical Cooperation monitors any foreign magical goods entering through it. The alley is not just a street, it's a checkpoint, a bottleneck. To let it expand might mean letting in things the ministry cannot control. And for a government obsessed with secrecy and containment, that risk may be too great. And yet the deeper truth may lie not in policy or spellwork, but in fear. Fear that to grow is to lose control. That with newness comes danger. The same fear that once branded Muggleborns as threats. The same fear that kept werewolves jobless and house elves enslaved. The same fear that says, if it changes, we may not recognize it anymore. Diagon Alley is more than a marketplace. It is the last bastion of an unchanging past. And perhaps that is exactly the problem. So the alley remains, charming, cobbled, crumbling in places. It is the stage for countless magical memories, and yet it does not grow, it does not breathe. It endures, a photograph from 100 years ago, still beautiful, still beloved, still unwilling to open its arms to the future. Number 24. Why are there so few foreign goods? The shops of Diagon Alley seem like the heart of the British magical economy. From the moment Harry first walks past the leaky cauldron and steps onto the cobbled street, the wizarding world reveals itself in a flood of distinctly British colour. Flourish and Blot sells British spellbooks. Madame Malkin's sells British robes. Elop's Owl Emporium features species common to the British Isles. Even Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, a brilliant explosion of magical innovation, relies on local charm and local humour. Nowhere in this crowded strip of magical commerce do we glimpse a sign reading "Imported from France," "Curses of Cairo," or "Transylvanian Hexes." And that absence, hidden beneath the bustling charm of the place, raises an inconvenient question. Why is there almost nothing foreign in Diagon Alley? The magical world is not as insular as it appears at first glance. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Beauxbaton and Durmstrang arrive at Hogwarts for the Triwizard Tournament. The headmistress of Beauxbaton, Madame Maxime, speaks with a thick French accent and uses French words when flustered. Igor Karkaroff brings his students from somewhere far colder. They come by ship and by flying carriage, surrounded by mystery, but clearly real, physical presences. Their arrival is a clear confirmation that the magical world is international. Yet even during that year, there is no mention of French wands, Eastern European potions, or Nordic magical gear being available in Britain. The foreign schools themselves bring some culture, food served at the feast, students speaking in other tongues, but no magical commerce follows. Diagon Alley appears as a closed loop of local wizarding industry. Ollivanders, the famed wand maker, has been the only notable wand supplier for generations. Makers of fine wands since 382 BC, reads the sign. But how can one man, or even one family line, dominate an entire nation's wand needs without competition from abroad? In France, Beauxbaton students use wands made by Grigorovich and perhaps others unnamed. In Eastern Europe, the name Grigorovich is spoken with reverence. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we learn that Grigorovich once owned the Elder Wand and that he had a wand shop in mainland Europe, yet there is not a single wand from Grigorovich in Ollivander's store. How is that possible in a world where international travel clearly exists? There is no magical customs agency ever mentioned in the books. We don't see packages from overseas arriving at Diagon Alley, nor do we see foreign catalogues of enchanted goods. The only known magical mail carrier is the owl system, which, while charmingly old-fashioned, isn't efficient enough for shipping international cargo. When Sirius sends Harry gifts from abroad, like the enchanted razor in the Goblet of Fire, it's a rare exception, and even then, the gift arrives wrapped plainly and anonymously. The idea of a Bulgarian robe shop or a Turkish potions boutique having a stall next to Flourish and Blot's feels more like fantasy than reality, but it shouldn't. Take, for example, the case of potions ingredients. In The Half-Blood Prince, Professor Slughorn invites his slug club to dine on crystallized pineapple mead and other delicacies, yet despite his international tastes, the potion supplies in Hogwarts seem staunchly domestic. The Hogwarts students shop at the apothecary in Diagon Alley, where jars of beetle eyes and shrivelfig line the walls. But where are the Balkan potions with their centuries-old recipes, the Egyptian elixirs whispered to prolong life, the Indian charms said to affect the soul? Not one is sold or even mentioned in Harry's experience of the magical market. This national exclusivity isn't just odd, it's suspicious. When Rita Skeeter publishes her sensationalist stories, her methods may be unethical, but her instinct to dig where others dare not look is not entirely without merit. A wizarding economy that ignores global goods suggests either a deliberate effort to protect local industries or an invisible hand guiding the market toward isolationism. Why would such a secretive yet obviously interconnected world maintain such strict control over imports? The answer may lie not in the shops themselves, but in who owns and influences them. The Ministry of Magic has shown, time and again, a tendency toward bureaucratic interference. When Arthur Weasley works in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, he is clearly seen as an eccentric, bordering on radical, for suggesting alternative magical solutions. In Order of the Phoenix, Dolores Umbridge's reign at Hogwarts shows the dangers of centralized magical control. If the Ministry can regulate education so severely, is it so unreasonable to assume they might regulate trade just as harshly? Perhaps licenses to sell in Diagon Alley are tied to long-standing bloodline contracts. Perhaps the shops are required to source their goods from within the aisles. The lack of competition would keep prices high and traditions intact. Even among magical creatures, the international divide is striking. Hagrid teaches care of magical creatures, showcasing everything from hippogriffs to thestrals, yet he must travel far to bring in new species. In the Goblet of Fire, he and Madame Maxime venture to France and beyond to negotiate with giants. The fact that such travel is rare and difficult suggests not that it is impossible, but that it is institutionally discouraged. Hagrid's love for creatures is not shared by the broader magical establishment, which views anything foreign or unpredictable with suspicion. It's not hard to imagine that similar attitudes apply to magical goods. Consider the brooms. The Nimbus series and the Firebolt dominate the British market. The Firebolt is mentioned as being of international quality, the best broom money can buy, according to Ron. But where is it made? The books do not say. However, there is no Firebolt store in Diagon Alley, and it arrives by owl post. That is the one glimmer suggesting a global economy. Still, it's telling that even this elite product is only accessed through special channels, like Harry's wealth or connections. The average witch or wizard cannot walk into quality Quidditch supplies and request a Japanese windhover broom or a Scandinavian snow tracker. The implication is clear. Access is limited, and options are few. At Borgin and Burke's in Knockturn Alley, we find a darker side of the magical market. The shop sells cursed necklaces, shrunken heads, and sinister artifacts. But even here, the origin of the goods is British. There are no voodoo dolls from Haiti, no gin bottles from Arabia, no Maori tattoos of enchantment. It suggests that even the black market is strangely nationalized, or worse, it suggests that international magical artifacts are hoarded, not sold. Perhaps there exists a class of elite collectors who keep foreign magic for themselves, deeming it too dangerous or too powerful for the public. The visit to Egypt by the Weasley family in Prisoner of Azkaban reveals a treasure trove of magical culture. Bill Weasley, working as a curse breaker for Gringotts, describes ancient tombs laden with traps and magical defences. Fred and George bring home souvenirs. Yet none of these foreign enchantments seem to filter into the British market. One would expect some of the artifacts to be displayed, traded or sold, but nothing appears in Diagon Alley. Is it because the goblins who run Gringotts keep foreign magic for themselves, or is there a higher magical authority deciding what the British public can access? In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander's global travels show the sheer diversity of magical species and magical cultures. He visits America, where the Magical Congress of the United States of America, MACUSA, operates with its own unique laws and institutions. Wands are registered, magical creatures are feared. Yet, even with all that travel, Newt does not speak of trade. He does not import foreign magical food, nor does he bring back enchanted American objects. It suggests that magical communities operate not just in secret, but in silos, deliberately isolated from one another. It raises the uncomfortable idea that Diagon Alley's lack of foreign goods is not the result of logistics but of ideology. The magical world may cloak itself in mystery, but its actions reveal something much more pedestrian: protectionism. Whether it is driven by fear, pride, or politics, the result is the same. The average witch or wizard remains blissfully unaware of the wonders of foreign magic. They know not the feathered serpents of Mexico, nor the storm chimes of the Himalayan monks. Their shelves are stocked with British cauldrons and British scrolls, and they do not ask why. This phenomenon also supports a larger truth about the wizarding world: its chronic resistance to change. From the persistence of quills and parchment to the slow pace of magical innovation, wizarding society clings to tradition with a tenacity that borders on obsession. Diagon Alley, with its Victorian facades and fixed set of shops, reflects that conservatism. If a foreign merchant were to arrive and open a shop selling Indian invisibility shawls or African rain charms, would the market even accept it? Or would they be driven out by suspicion and quiet ministry intervention? There is also the question of race and blood status. The wizarding world has long struggled with its own version of prejudice. Pure blood supremacy, as championed by the Malfoys and Voldemort, is deeply entwined with cultural xenophobia. If foreign magic is seen as impure, then perhaps its absence from Diagon Alley is not a coincidence but a consequence of magical bigotry. The absence of diversity in magical goods may reflect an unspoken hierarchy where British magic is seen as superior and foreign traditions are relegated to the margins. And yet the magic of other lands persists, hidden and waiting. Perhaps in distant corners of the world, secret markets thrive. Perhaps in a fog-covered alley in Istanbul or a floating bazaar in the Nile, magical goods of incredible beauty are traded beneath veils of secrecy. Perhaps there exists a global network of magical exchange, one that deliberately avoids the British Isles because of their closed gates. The irony is sharp. In trying to preserve their magical heritage, British wizards may have sealed themselves off from a world of wonder. Even Hogwarts, that great institution of magical learning, reflects this insularity. The curriculum includes herbology and potions, but no global magical studies. There is no class on the spells of Africa or the enchantments of Japan. No foreign wizards are invited to lecture. The closest we come is the fleeting presence of exchange students during the Triwizard Tournament, and even they are treated more like curiosities than equals. There is no lasting cultural exchange, no shared learning. It is as if the British wizarding world has walled itself in, not from danger, but from difference. Diagon Alley remains a symbol of magical wonder, but beneath its charming surface lies a troubling truth. The absence of foreign goods reveals not only a blind spot in magical commerce, but a larger issue of cultural narrowness. For all its spells and potions, the wizarding world seems unable or unwilling to embrace the full breadth of magical diversity that exists beyond its shores. Whether out of fear, pride, or bureaucracy, this magical isolation leaves a question lingering in the shadows, waiting to be answered. Number 25. Why are there no places to rest or relax? The bustle of Diagon Alley is almost musical in its rhythm. Shuffling footsteps over cobblestones, the clink of cauldrons, the crackle of magical parchment being folded into bags, and the hum of excited chatter as witches and wizards rush about their errands. But when one stops to examine this beloved heart of the British magical world, a curious void opens up. For all its magic, its history, and its charm, Diagon Alley offers no true place to sit, to breathe, or simply exist without the demand to buy something. It is a street that celebrates commerce but forgets community. Diagon Alley, described vividly through the eyes of an 11-year-old Harry Potter, explodes with wonder. There are shimmering robes in Madame Malkin's, shining wands in Ollivander's, and towers of books in Flourish and Blots. Yet if a tired customer were to pause in their stroll and look for a bench or a small fountain where children might toss in enchanted sickles, they would be left wanting. There are no cozy corners shaded by enchanted trees, no musical fountains bubbling with charm-enhanced water, no spaces that invite one to linger without the pressure to spend. The entire structure of Diagon Alley seems to orbit around consumption, not community. Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlour is perhaps the one exception, and even then it feels like an accident of architecture rather than an intentional oasis. Harry once sat outside the shop, eating free sundaes and poring over his homework, while Fortescue himself gave him tips on witch-burning in the 14th century. But where, precisely, did he sit? Rowling never tells us of a bench, a plaza, or even a garden table with an umbrella. We only know he was sitting outside the ice cream parlour, but the lack of further detail suggests this was an outlier, not a feature of the alley's design. There is no mention of passers-by sitting nearby, no children with sticky fingers playing under trees, just Harry, his ice cream, and Fortescue's whispered historical commentary. One lone boy in a world of constant motion. The absence of restful space speaks volumes about the values embedded in magical architectural culture. The wizarding world in its spatial design seems to undervalue leisure unless it is tied to a transaction. There are places to drink like the Leaky Cauldron, and places to shop like Aelop's Owl Emporium or Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, but nowhere to simply be. Even Nocturne Alley, dark and sinister, is lined with shops rather than abandoned courtyards or meeting points for whispered exchanges. It's as though the very nature of public magical space resists non-commercial human presence. In a world that celebrates the whimsical and the eccentric, why does Diagon Alley lack the kind of communal magic found in even the simplest Muggle park? Wizards, we are told, enjoy leisure, Quidditch matches, Yule balls and garden parties at the Burrow, and yet this vibrant alleyway, a central artery of magical society, is devoid of relaxation zones. It suggests a culture that encourages movement over meditation, browsing over bonding, purchasing over pausing. Even Hogsmeade, with all its cosy appeal, is built around consumption, butterbeer, sweets, jokes and robes. The implications stretch further than just urban design. If a child gets tired while their parents are buying school supplies, where do they rest? Surely not everyone wants to drag themselves into the dark, boozy corners of the Leaky Cauldron just for a moment of peace. Hogwarts students, often found browsing Flourish and Blots or chatting outside quality Quidditch supplies, are rarely described as sitting anywhere. The imagery is kinetic, hurried, purposeful. Nobody is ever lounging in Diagon Alley. Perhaps they are not allowed to. The absence of such spaces also reflects a deeper absence in the emotional architecture of the wizarding world. In Muggle cities, benches in public squares often become the stage for human connection, old friends catching up, young lovers whispering secrets, children playing in the sunlight. In Diagon Alley, however, such images do not exist. There are no green spaces with magical plants humming softly in the breeze, no stone benches that warm themselves on cold mornings, no music playing gently from enchanted instruments hidden in treetops. What a missed opportunity for a society that has mastered levitation, time travel, and animated suits of armor. One might argue that Diagon Alley is narrow, pressed tightly between Muggle London and the secretive magical world, and thus lacks the room for gardens or open spaces. But such logic collapses under the weight of magic itself. Wizards can expand the interior of tents into full apartments. They can fold entire shops into suitcases. Surely the Ministry of Magic, or whoever oversees magical zoning, could spare a spell or two to create a little square, a magical garden, or a space that exists outside of commerce. After all, we know that wizardkind can do extraordinary things with space. The design of Gringotts itself illustrates this irony. The bank is massive, cavernous, filled with tracks and carts and endless vaults stretching far beneath the street. All of that hidden beneath a modest marble facade. Why not use similar magic to provide a space above ground where weary witches can sip tea while enchanted butterflies flutter by? Why not allow Diagon Alley to breathe? There's an emotional toll to such a design. When Harry first visited Diagon Alley, it was his first true immersion into the magical world. He was dazzled, but one might wonder, had he not had Hagrid to guide him, or Florian Fortescue to feed him ice cream, where would he have gone to process the enormity of this new life? There is no sanctuary in Diagon Alley, no safe corner to cry, to breathe, to dream. It is magical, yes, but also curiously hollow. Even adult wizards must grow weary. Does Professor McGonagall never visit Diagon Alley? Does she never grow tired of standing? Would Arthur Weasley, on one of his many excursions to the alley, not enjoy sitting under a charmed tree that drops glowing leaves in autumn colours? The absence of such spaces is not just architectural, it is cultural, and perhaps even ideological. Leisure that isn't tied to commerce appears to have little place in Diagon Alley. One could imagine what might be. A magical amphitheatre where children perform spontaneous duels with practice wands. A glimmering fountain that tells stories when coins are tossed into its waters. A garden where the flowers shift colour according to the emotions of those nearby. Such places would encourage community, storytelling, connection. But as it stands, Diagon Alley seems designed to move people along, from one transaction to the next, from one marvel to another, without room to digest the wonder they are fed. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the line, "A snowy owl was fluttering inside a cage in the window," evokes a vivid image of magic pressed behind glass. Everything in Diagon Alley feels this way, enticing, contained for sale. There is no moment when the world of Diagon Alley truly opens itself to its people. Even the joy of watching a demonstration at the front of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes feels like a performance, not a conversation. The architecture tells a silent story. In the wizarding world, space is not neutral, it is enchanted, imbued with intention. The lack of restful areas is therefore not an oversight, but a reflection of what matters most in these spaces. Commerce is the spell that binds Diagon Alley together, not community. Magic serves function, not fellowship. It is a deeply unmagical truth, buried within a world of wands and wonders. Even Nocturne Alley, with its sinister aura, could have told a different story. Imagine if it held a secret garden for misunderstood creatures, a place of redemption, hidden behind blood-curdling signs and shadowed storefronts. But it doesn't. It reflects the same truth. The wizarding world has little patience for idleness, reflection, or even quiet rebellion. You buy, you go, you vanish. It is telling that Harry's warmest moments in Diagon Alley come not from the space itself, but from the people he meets, Hagrid, Fortescue, even the goblin at Gringotts who guides him. The setting never offers comfort on its own. Comfort in the wizarding world must be bought or stumbled upon by accident. It is not built into the bones of the place. There is something haunting in that realization. A world of such limitless potential has built its most iconic street like a funnel, directing witches and wizards toward their next purchase, their next distraction, their next obligation. It is a world of colours, charms and cauldrons, but not of shade trees or birdsong. Perhaps this absence is why the Burrow feels so different. Molly Weasley's home is chaotic, yes, but filled with comfort. There are chairs, there is tea, there is a backyard with gnomes, a table under the sky, moments of stillness. That space reflects love, not labour, community, not commerce. And one has to wonder, why is such comfort confined to homes hidden from the public face of wizarding society? Diagon Alley, for all its splendour, is a mirror of magical values. It shows us what wizardkind chooses to display and what it withholds. The absence of public rest, of unbought joy, tells a story just as loud as a talking mirror. It tells us that even in a world of dragons and phoenixes, some very human needs remain unmet. And until the day Diagon Alley plants its first magical tree, those needs will remain invisible. Number 26. Why is there no direct connection to Hogwarts? In the heart of wizarding Britain, Two names rise like twin peaks over the magical landscape, Hogwarts and Diagon Alley. One is the bastion of education, the other a bustling artery of commerce. And yet, despite the centuries-old prominence of both institutions, they remain curiously unconnected. Not in geography, many magical locations are concealed or relocated at will, but in tradition, function and structure. There is no fireplace inside Hogwarts connected to the Floo network for student shopping, no magical lift that whisks young witches and wizards from the castle grounds to the cobbled streets of Diagon Alley. Instead, every year without fail, children travel by Muggle train to London, then pass through the leaky cauldron into Diagon Alley, make their purchases, and return once more to King's Cross Station to begin their journey anew. This elaborate ritual, repeated over centuries, raises an uncomfortable but essential question. Why? For a world where magic can transport a person across continents in the blink of an eye, the absence of a direct connection between Hogwarts and Diagon Alley seems less like a logistical oversight and more like a deliberate omission. Hogwarts is protected by enchantments, ancient and resilient, perhaps even jealous in their purpose. It is a fortress built to withstand intrusion, influence, and invasion. But even so, why not create a sanctioned, controlled link for supplies? A Floo-connected fireplace in the headmaster's office accessible only to trusted vendors? A protected tunnel charmed to repel all but authorized deliveries? Even Azkaban, that dreadful place, presumably receives supplies more efficiently than a school that requires cauldrons, books, parchment, and potion ingredients in bulk every single year. There is also the strange inefficiency in the purchase ritual itself. First-year students, most of whom have never even heard of the magical world before their Hogwarts letters arrive, are expected to plunge into Diagon Alley on their own, or with guardians just as mystified as they are. A child like Harry Potter, raised by Muggles and completely unfamiliar with magical culture, is led there by Hagrid as a personal favour. But what about others without connections, Muggle-borns like Hermione Granger, whose parents are utterly alien to this universe? Would it not make sense for Hogwarts to include a starter supply pack or a recommendation for a magical delivery service? Professor McGonagall could, at the very least, offer students a pamphlet with enchanted parchment that connects to a Hogwarts-approved supplier. This disconnect is not without consequences. Consider the scenario where a child lives far from London, perhaps in northern Scotland or the remote reaches of Cornwall. The burden on the family, magical or not, is significant. Travel to London, arrange overnight accommodations if necessary, navigate the intricacies of Diagon Alley, and then reverse the process to send their child to King's Cross on Kate. September the 1st. Surely magic, with its ability to shrink trunks and charm brooms, could alleviate this burden. Yet no such system exists. The child is expected to manage the weight, literal and metaphorical, of this journey, often without assistance beyond the initial guidance. It becomes more unsettling when viewed through the lens of history. Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago. Diagon Alley has existed for several centuries, becoming the central market of magical Britain. Even during turbulent times, such as the rise of Grindelwald or Voldemort's first reign, no infrastructure was established to protect or streamline the connection between the school and its primary supplier. During the Second Wizarding War, students still relied on individual visits to Diagon Alley, despite known Death Eater activity and widespread fear. The books show us Harry being escorted through a nearly deserted Diagon Alley under close guard just to purchase textbooks. Why risk lives for parchment? And yet these risks and inefficiencies persist decade after decade. Some may argue it's a rite of passage, that stepping into Diagon Alley for the first time, eyes wide at the moving brooms and chattering goblin tellers, is a foundational experience. But traditions can evolve. The Triwizard Tournament was banned for centuries due to its dangers. Quidditch underwent reforms. Even Hogwarts introduced protective enchantments during times of war. Why then does the Diagon Alley trek remain sacred and unaltered? Perhaps the answer lies not in convenience, but in cultural weight. Diagon Alley is in many ways a test. The magical world is not handed to the child, it is earned. The student must walk into that alley, feel the jostling of witches in long cloaks, smell the dragon liver at Slug and Jiggers, and endure the embarrassment of choosing a wand that spits sparks in their face before finding one that sings in their hand. These are not just errands, they are awakenings. As Harry stepped into Ollivander's for the first time, the air thick with dust and memory, he was not just shopping, he was being chosen. The wand chooses the wizard, Garrick Ollivander reminded him. Such moments cannot be replicated through mail order.